I didn't realize that George was Larry. Probably, it was in that that first season of with that confidence order of 4. Um, it was somewhere in there. There was some. I can't remember exactly what it was. There was a moment in the script that with my fine classical actor training, I went to Larry and I said, Larry, first of all, this would never happen to anybody, but if it did, no human being would react like this. And Larry said, what do you mean? This happened to me, and this is exactly what I did. And I went, oh, okay. And it was kind of at that moment that I understood that he was writing his own experiences and his own reactions. So I made a conscious switch to leave the Woody Allen model behind and start to try and do as blatant a Larry David imitation as I could. I had no idea that at that time that it was any kind of an alter ego for Larry David. Somewhere in those first 8 episodes, they wrote a scenario where George got into a situation which I thought was completely unlikely, and then reacted to it in a way that I thought was for writing purposes only, because no human being would do this. And I went to Larry after the table read and I said, Larry, please help me. First of all, this wouldn't happen to anybody, but if it did, no one would react like this. And Larry looked at me and went, what are you talking about? This happened to me. This is exactly what I did. And that was when the bell went off in my head and I went, oh, jeez. He's George. He's George. He's writing George. That's when I got introduced to the Larry David notebooks, where almost everything, some element of every story we did on Seinfeld came out of something that happened to him. And that's when Woody Allen went away, and I started to laser focus on what makes Larry Larry and incorporate as much of it as I could into the building of that character. So that's when it all clicked. And one of these days I'll go back and look at the titles of the shows and go, well, it must have been that one. 6, 7, 8, 9 episodes. I'm doing Woody Allen. If you go back and look at it, that's who I'm thinking. And somewhere there was an episode, I gotta remember which one it was one of these days, but there was an episode that when it came to the table reading and we looked at it, it made no sense to me. And I went to Larry and I said, Larry, you gotta help me with this. First of all, this is insane. This would never happen to anybody. But even if it did, no one would react like this. What are you thinking? And he said, what are you talking about? This happened to me and this is exactly what I did. And I went, oh my God. And it was at that moment that I realized George was an alter ego for Larry, and I began actively looking to do Larry David. Well, we ran into an early episode where nothing made sense to me. The situation seemed ludicrous.
On Seinfeld?
On Seinfeld.
Which situation was it?
I wish I could remember the episode, because it was in the first 8, 9, 10 of them. But I remember we did the table read, and I went to Larry and said, Larry, please help me. This would never happen to anybody, but if it did, no one on the planet would react like this. And he said, oh, what are you talking about? This happened to me. This is exactly what I did. and I went, oh, wow. And then the bells went off. I went, oh.
Oh, that's who I am.
Oh, okay.
Right.
And then I just started really observing him and trying to pull as much of him into me as I could.
Did you realize at the time you were doing Larry David? Or
No,
you were playing some. So did you then study Larry David?
Yes.
Once you got the job, which is fascinating.
If you look at the first, 10-ish episodes, Woody Allen is still my role model for the first 10 episodes. And I wish I could remember. I got to go back and figure out what episode this was. But somewhere around episode 10, a script came to the table, and we read it for everybody, and it just seemed preposterous to me. The situation just seemed crazy. Yeah. So I went to Larry and I said, Larry, please help me with this, because this would never happen to anybody, but if it did, nobody would react like this. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. This happened to me, and this is exactly what I did. And so, and that's when I realized that George was sort of an alter ego avatar for Larry. And then I started really kind of studying Larry.
The character that you were playing is basically Larry.
I wish I could tell you, it was an episode, and I wish I could remember what the hell episode it was, because people have asked me for years, and I still can't put my finger on it. But it was early on. It was in that 13 pickup. And my role model on the character had been Woody Allen. Somewhere in those first 13 episodes, there was an episode where when we read it at the table, it struck me that the basic situation George was in was absolutely absurd, that it just was a writer's bit of folly and imagination. So I went to Larry after the table read, and I said, Larry, help me. We both know this would not happen in real life, but even if it did, no one would react like this. So you're going for something. What are you going for so that I can figure out how to get there for you? And he went, I don't know what you're talking about. This happened to me, and this is exactly what I did.
I think I read that story.
And
I told you that. I heard you'd say, I think it was it when you got fired or something?
No, that was much later on. At that point, I knew that
you
that
knew
Larry,
with him.
Yeah.
somewhere, not in the first season, because the first season was a whopping 4 episodes.
4 episodes.
But somewhere in that Confidence 13, there was an episode, and I can't remember what it was, but when we did the table read, I thought the George storyline was a little preposterous. I just thought this is a weird thing, never going to happen. And they've got me reacting to it in this strange way.
Yeah.
So after the table read, I went up to Larry and I said, Larry, you help me with this. You're going for something, and I want to get it for you. Because we both know this would never happen in life. And if it did, nobody would react like this. So what are you thinking? And Larry said, I don't know what you're talking about. This happened to me, and it's exactly what I did. And in my head, I went, oh, George is Larry, Larry is George.